There's been a lot of discussion, and rightly so, about what has remained the same in NATO and what has changed in NATO. And I will start my very brief remarks by giving you a sense of what we think has not changed. To start with the past, in a way. And that is the two pillars on which NATO operates today and has operated for some time. One, which is mentioned by Minister Vondra, among others, is the principle of collective defense. Article 5 embodies this, the idea that an attack on one member of the alliance is an attack on all. The strategic concept reaffirmed Article 5, and I fully agree with what the Deputy Foreign Minister said, that Article 5 also, embodied in Article 5, is the understanding that NATO is a community of shared values. What is the idea of collective defense was reaffirmed. What is new is the idea that collective defense is applied. The idea of collective defense is applied to new and emerging threats, and that's what the strategic concept is really about. The recognition that the nature of the most likely threat, which in the past has been viewed as large armies streaming across borders, is now different. It's malicious cyber attacks, it's terrorist attacks, it's ballistic missile attacks. So that's one pillar. Collective defense has not changed. The second pillar, a more recent one for NATO, is cooperative security, also reaffirmed at Lisbon. The recognition that in a globalized world, the security of the 28 members of the alliance depends in large part on creating security beyond our borders. The idea that we need to be engaged with the rest of the world in order to prevent threats from emerging, or to mitigate and deal with those threats that have emerged. And we do that through cooperation, and the most obvious example is the NATO-led cooperation we've had in Afghanistan. So that's also reaffirmed in the Lisbon documents. I'd like to then talk a little bit about what has changed. The reorientation within the strategic concept to deal with emerging threats that I just mentioned, and specifically on ballistic missiles, the agreement of NATO leaders to develop a territorial missile defense capability. The European phased adaptive approach announced by President Obama last year will be the United States' contribution to that capability. Of course, there are many details to be worked out, including, importantly, as was mentioned earlier, the nature of the cooperative effort with Russia related to missile defense. Beyond missile defense, it was reaffirmed at Lisbon the need to focus on capabilities, because without capabilities, the best strategic concept is rendered inoperable. These will require investments, and again, I agree with many of my fellow panelists who have highlighted the difficulty and challenge of resources in the current economic environment. Also agreed was NATO's desire to deepen and expand its partnerships with other powers, existing and emerging powers, including the European Union, Russia, our non-alliance partners who are with us in Afghanistan, and others. That recognizes that NATO can best advance its own security through richer cooperation with others. The other, one other thing I would mention is, and I think Mr. Vondra touched on this briefly as well, is the endorsement of NATO leaders to an administrative streamlining of the alliance, and that goes again to the question of resources and making NATO operate more efficiently, which we all recognize as an enormous challenge, but also a necessary challenge to meet. And finally, on this point, Lisbon reaffirmed that the door to NATO remains open to European democracies that meet standards for NATO membership.